Ladies and gentlemen, I would like first of all, I would like to share certain general remarks before I begin referring to the most important issues related to the extermination of the Roma on the Polish territory. First of all, let me explain why I am using the term Holocaust. Some of you probably know that the extermination of the Roma is referred to in a different way, and so a basic question arises, why? It happens because among, for example, Polish or Roma or Israeli researchers, there is no, and it's crucial, there is no agreement as to what this kind of extermination really was. The knowledge, and especially when compared to the lives of the Jews, this knowledge is still incomplete, and we can say that it is incomplete, especially when it comes to the Polish land. I would like to pay your attention to the fact that in the written literature about on gypsies, there is a term forgotten Holocaust or silence Holocaust, and these terms refer to the so-called evaluative competition of the genocides on the gypsies and the Roma due to the scale, motives, or historical policy, and that's why this term is oftentimes rejected, and privately by myself as well. And so the research for a proper term led to the popularization of a term poraimos. Sometimes it is a term baro, that is great, consume, great, demolishing. However, this caused a lot of controversies due to a wide range of meaning, a wide meaning of this term, because it also means rape, and in general it has a sexual context. That's why it is not approved by many people, because they know what it actually means. And therefore, other researchers propose phonetically similar words, meaning destruction, that is paralimos. However, it was not accepted so well. In certain scientific and political texts, so we can find some other terms, for example, samodaripien, meaning mass genocide, or kalitrash, black fear, or Warszawie Matale, meaning unhappy years. All these terms, these words, are not stable, and they weren't actually disseminated in a proper way or accepted by the whole Roma society. And this is crucial because it's not only about the scientific world, but also the Roma society and their perception of these terms. And that's why we should use all of them with the full awareness that they are not perfect. However, certainly in the world of science, more and more often a simple word, Holocaust, is used, and that's why I will be using this term as well. The extermination of the Roma and the Gypsies had a very Nazi character, that's why it was called the Holocaust. However, it is important to mention as a very important issue when compared to the extermination of the Jews, the genocide of the Roma and Sinti was to a smaller extent systematized. It was not so much planned and ideologized, so it was not so much based on the strong ideology. From a theoretical point of view, we adopt a term poraimos, structuralism, and not intentionalism. What does this mean? Why structuralism? In other words, the genocide of the Roma and Sinti, was not the result of the advanced plan, ideological plan, but actually, and this is a key issue, the escalation of discrimination towards the Roma, which happened due to different changes, Nazi changes in the process of creating the policy and the party, the Nazi party. And this thought is expressed by one of the documents, educational documents, published by Yad Vashem, titled The Gypsies, where it summarizes the issues of poraimus, referring to the Holocaust in a specific way. Let me read a fragment of this document, which I think quite clearly explains the differences between the Holocaust and the extermination of the Roma. Clothing. The final picture of the extermination is quite misleading. On the territory of the Third Reich, they murdered people with mixed blood, whereas the majority of clean gypsies survived. In the rest part of Europe, there was not clear policy apart from the migratory gypsies, who were considered antisocial. As claimed by the Otto Ollendorf, the leader of 1 Group D, quoting, the gypsies were not Jewish, so it was not necessary to murder all of them. That's the end of the quote. And now the quote from the previous document: the gypsies that were considered clean blood could still survive under the control. This mixed blood, the gypsies were murdered, but the difference between the lives between the gypsies and the Jewish people, the Jewish people were murdered in total, and regarding the gypsies, it was more selective. That's the end of the quote from this educational document published by Yad Vashem. So the awareness of this selectivity seems to be really key and crucial. Obviously, the selectivity by the Germans did not really mean that it was not possible to distinguish certain periods of the extermination or present certain periods. It is possible, but I need to pay attention to the fact that it can be done only at a very general level, and it will be a definition, registration, separation, isolation in gypsy camps or concentration camps, and at the end, deportation to the extermination camps. That's the general scheme, general model that can be distinguished. But when speaking of periodization of the Roma or Gypsy extermination, we need to emphasize that, and this is really crucial, that the Hitler's rise to power did not really change, or the censorship, or it was not the beginning of the Gypsy repression. The Germans, they just intensified the current forms of repression, leading to the consequence of the premise contained in the mixture of modernization ideology and racist theory. These are two components that were really crucial in their policy, and these were Nazi Germans who changed the extermination into the genocide or Holocaust. When it comes to the Polish land, Polish territory, the problem of the Holocaust is quite large, because these territories became, after being occupied in 1939 by Germans, they became the major center of Holocaust, where Gypsies, Roma, Sintis from the whole Europe were transported here. And it was also a place where the majority of the centers, extermination centers, actually were placed. Majdanko, Birkenau, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Stutowo, and other different kinds of camps, not only extermination camps. So they came there before the great extermination of the Jews. So the Polish territories became or were a specific place because Germans decided that they would transport here to the Polish territory gypsies from all countries that were occupied by them. And concentrating that they wanted to concentrate them on the Polish territory. And for example, in January 1949, around 5,000 of the Roma came to the gypsy camp in Łódź, which was situated on the territory of Łódź Ghetto, the Łódź Ghetto, and later on, these gypsies coming from mainly from Austria, from the Third Reich, they came to the extermination camp in Chełm. However, the majority of the Polish Roma, Polish gypsies, that is, those who were related to the Polish land, and I need to emphasize that they were murdered not in camps, but in numerous executions. That is, what I want to say is that they were murdered outside the camp system. We know only 200 documented places where these murders took place. For example, a well-known place Szczurowo, Żabno, Karczew, or Szałas. These murders took also place in eastern borderlands, in Vilnius voivodeship, in Lviv. I do not really want to mention or list all these places because these were just mass executions taking place on the Polish occupied territories by Germans. Obviously, these executions, when considering all occupied Europe, took place not only on Polish territory, but also on the territory of the USSR and in Czech Republic or in Slovakia. One of the key reasons why this extermination of the Polish gypsies were limited to the extermination outside the camp was not only the mentioned decision of Germany, lack of their consequence in their actions, but also what they wanted. They just wanted, they did a simple calculation to be reasonable when it comes to the possibilities to stop the nomadic lifestyle of the gypsies, right? So the aim was to close them in camps, in ghettos, because I have to add here that the majority of the gypsies, the Roma living on the Polish land, had a nomadic lifestyle or half-nomadic lifestyle. And so it turned out that when they started to isolate them or separate them, the scale of escapes, mainly from Jewish ghettos, was huge. And oftentimes they didn't decide to introduce this procedure of building of certain stages of concentration stages before their total final extermination. I would like to pay your attention to the fact that for nomadic nomadic gypsies, even putting them in the camp and separating them. It was a kind of repression for them and had a huge impact on their emotions. So they really wanted to escape. They had this urge to escape because they were migrants. They loved to lead this nomadic lifestyle. They were not able to stay in one place for a longer period of time. That's what they felt. That's what their culture told them. And the last general remark that I would like to make regards the number of casualties among gypsies and the Roma. And I have to say that in this case, in the case of gypsies and the Roma, we do not really know even the exact number of the exterminated gypsies. The reason for that is the fact that the majority of them had no document, citizenship, registration. Many countries, such as Poland, before war, did not really maintain any gypsy documentation, registration, and therefore we did not really know how many of them were on the Polish land before war. We only have access to very general data, and these are data, let's say estimated data, and usually they say that the Third Reich murdered around 5,600 gypsies. However, we may often read the information that it was between 5,600 to 1.5 million. So as you can see, it's a huge difference, right, between the numbers. So probably we will never find out exactly how many of them, because we have to say that the gypsies had a nomadic lifestyle. They had a kind of, the so-called oral culture. So that means that they didn't really write down their experiences. That's why there are a lot of obstacles, difficulties to show real numbers. It was as I could say, unreachable society. Obviously, we have different documents, registers that somehow show us certain numbers. For example, we have a register coming from the Auschwitz-Birkenau, which I will mention, where we can read that there were around 23,000 of gypsies and Sinti coming from different countries, European countries. I think that this quite long introduction was necessary, was important, because the picture of the Holocaust of the Roma, of the Gypsies, is very complex. And we cannot, in such a lecture, we cannot skip information regarding the subject of the Roma in Auschwitz-Birkenau. I think that this is a central point of this narration. This is a Roma symbol of Roma extermination, of the Roma extermination. And what is important here, what we should mention in the very beginning, it is the fact that the experience of the Jewish extermination was not only the Polish experience, but mainly the European gypsies, because the Polish gypsies were murdered in a different way outside the camp system, in executions. When it comes to Auschwitz-Birkenau camp, the Roma constituted the third group of the deported in terms of the number. After the Jews and the Poles, the transports came there from as many as 14 countries, and the decision about the huge role of a certain, not at the very beginning precise camp was made on the 16th of December 1942 by Heinrich Himmler, who at that time ordered the deportation of the remaining part of the Roma to this camp, concentration camp. And this executive order made by the RSKA that was concerned with the Gypsy matter on the 21 January 1943 made it more precise. The place of deportation was supposed to be the Auschwitz camp. And as a result of this decision, of this order, in this camp, in the B2E part, a family gypsy camp was established. It was called Lager, and it lasted there for only 17 months. These deportations of the Gypsies began in February 1943, and they were continued until July 1944. The prisoners came from mainly from Germany, Czech and Moravia Protectorate. Small groups also came from the Netherlands, Belgium, Croatia, USSR, Lithuania, Hungary, and also there were prisoners coming from Norway and Spain. It is estimated that this camp contained around 23,000 gypsies, including males, females, and children, and around 21,000 were registered in this camp, registered officially, I mean here formally. In the camp there were around 400 gypsy babies were born in the camps, and there were also Polish gypsies, but these Polish gypsies did not undergo any registrations. We know that this gypsy camp, that to this gypsy came around 17,000 of Polish gypsies on the 23rd of March 1943 from Białystok, and they were not in any register. They were just transferred to gas chambers right away. They were taken to gas chambers right away. What's also important, out of these 23,000 of gypsies that were transported to the camp, 21,000 were murdered the majority in the gas chambers. Since they were treated as prisoners, antisocial prisoners, they also got the badges in the form of black triangles with a serious number with the Z Ligaher, and they had this in the form of a tattoo on the left arm. The Roma, at the moment of coming to the camp, they were not selected. They didn't undergo selection. They were not separated, but they were transferred to the barracks. All of them were kept, let's say, together. And many of them, during the stay in the camp, they were also allowed to wear civil clothes. Due to insufficient food and with a lot of crowds in the gypsy, let's say, camp, the sanitary conditions got really worsened, because of that, and that's why there was a lot of epidemics, especially typhoid fever or starvation diarrhea. There were also people suffering from the so-called noma, especially among children. And noma is a kind of bacterial infection of the oral cavity, causing, for example, the destruction of the cheek. And you can see that especially in the case of serious malnourishment. These epidemics resulted in a high number of fatalities among the Roma. It was also the cause or the reason for their quick extermination by Germans, just taking them to the gas chambers in fear of spreading of these epidemics. We also know that the Germans sometimes also triggered these epidemics. The problem of the extermination of the Roma in this gypsy camp was not only about the description of the death industry, but also about the issue of experiments, medical experiments that took place there. At this point, we have no doubts when it comes to gypsy societies that the role of the camp was correlated with the German research institutes. So a lot of people, a lot of gypsies groups were referred to this camp. And for example, a group of 40 children that first were kept in the orphan home near Stuttgart. They were before they were deported to the camp. They had undergone different medical experiments headed by Robert Ritter and Eva Justin, the representatives of the Institute of Hygienic Research. The goal was to check the androgenic character of the gypsies, which, despite of many attempts to raise them outside the Roma society, they wanted to them to get rid of this inability to assimilate, to steal, and other negative features. That's why they referred this number of 40 orphans to the Auschwitz-Birkenau camp. Of course, when talking about medical experiments conducted on the gypsies and the Roma, we need to also mention a doctor, the chief doctor of this gypsy camp. And from the end of May 1943 until August 1944, this role was played by SS Hauptmann Führer, Dr. Josef Mengele. At the same time, he was also a doctor, a camp doctor, and also worked in hospitals and outpatient clinics in other parts of the camp. Of course, he was not only responsible for the problem of medical experiments on the gypsies. He was the chief doctor of the whole camp at a certain point. Dr. Mengele, on the order of the Research Institute of Anthropography, Biology, and Racism in Berlin, he began anthropologic research on different races, but mainly on the gypsies and the Roma, and twins, especially monozygotic twins. Some part of the barrack, the so-called sauna, situated behind block number 32, was his lab, where he conducted this research, these experiments on these twins that were at his disposal. In summer 1943, in the gypsy camp, there was a special disease, the so-called NOMA that I had mentioned before. And this disease attacked especially children and teenagers, and therefore he started research on the reasons, the causes of this disease. But of course, this was a kind of pseudo-medical research, and it caused a lot of deaths among children, gypsy children, which is horrible and disgusting, especially when we think about his actions. On his order, a special kindergarten was established in the camp, or a kind of nursery. It was actually both a nursery and a kindergarten, in which there were children up to 6 years of age, including also those that were subjected to intense research by Dr. Mendele. At the very beginning, these children received even better quality food, but they were only activities that aimed at negative results. I mean, it was a kind of propaganda. It was visited by SS men, but also civilians that took photos with the children, and they were very happy that in this camp there was a kindergarten or nursery. Another part of research by Dr. Mendele were people, biological personalities. For example, different eye color in one person, referred to as heterochromia iridis. Also among gypsies, those who suffered from different eye color, they were murdered in the camp on the order of Dr. Mendele, and in this way they could receive samples, and these samples were then sent to the Research of Anthropology in Berlin, in Dahlen. When talking about these horrible lives of the Roma children in the camp, we need to mention that during this family camp, during the period of this family camp, a lot of people were then transported deep in the Reich to different camps. We need to mention that as well, because we had such cases. They found employment in the industry. Some of them were moved and abused and moved and used in different camps, and they also underwent different experiments, and some numbers were able to be released from the camp on the condition that they underwent sterilization, and sterilization is a totally different matter that needs to be discussed. Moreover, what we need to mention, there were also cases of release from Auschwitz, or moving people, the Roma, to different places. For example, the former German soldiers with high ranks coming at the same time from mixed marriages. Oftentimes the reason for the release was the non-gypsy interventions of these gypsy family members, and these are facts that we need to also mention. We need to refer to these situations, to this kind of cases, because it was not possible in the case of Jews, for example, and it happened in the case of the gypsies. The gypsy camp lasted until the 2nd September, August 1944, and on this day there were around 4,200, 300 gypsies who were put on board and transported to gas chambers. What's important in here is that the gypsies were trying to resist this situation, but the SS men suppressed this resistant movement. We often referred to it as Treblinka rebellion. It is also important to mention that the Gypsies, the Roma in Trebinka, they were trying to resist, active resistance. These facts are not well known and not written in the literature, but hopefully in the future there will be more information to show the scale of this resistance and to emphasize the importance of such facts. And during this last liquidation of the camp on the 2nd of August 1944, there were a lot of Dantean scenes because of the former prisoners, especially. It's important to mention the case of the attempt to survive life by Helen, by the German whose husband was a gypsy. She got a confirmation that she would survive. She and her 5 children would survive. But when they were found in the barrack, in the kindergarten by the SS men who were searching the camp, she received a proposal to leave the camp provided she would leave her 5 children in the camp. And of course, the heartbroken mother refused to do so, and so she died together with her family in the gas chamber. Well, regarding this tragedy and similar tragedies, well, this information is confirmed by many former prisoners, and it can be found in the main gypsy book called Handbook, which consists of 25,000 gypsy names situated in the camp. And this book is a huge source of information because now we know who was transported to the camp, who was in the camp, and or who. That's why we're very happy that we managed to keep this document. And of course, let me add that the 2nd of August, 1944, the 2nd of August in Poland is the day of remembrance of the Roma Holocaust, to commemorate this last liquidation of the camp. And I think that at the end of my lecture, let me just summarize this subject, and I would say here, I would mention the issue of the post-war settlements. We need to emphasize here that the Roma had never been considered the party of the end of this conflict. They are not considered either the victims or the survivals. In the Nuremberg, there was not even one Roma witness. For the next dozens of years, nobody actually mentioned the Roma Holocaust. There were no discussions about it, to be honest. And also, nobody even tried to commemorate this drama, to commemorate this extermination of the gypsies. Oftentimes, it is said that there were no damages provided to the Roma. Of course, we know that no perpetrators, gypsy perpetrators, were punished, especially those who conducted those horrible, disgusting experiments, medical experiments. In Poland, in the place where this extermination took place for dozens of years, the problem of the Roma was undertaken by a few, maybe 1 to 3 researchers, headed by Jerzy Titowski, perhaps you know him. And because of the communism between 44 89, in this period there was no narration that could say or explain to the world and talk about this extermination of the Roma. And currently we're trying to catch up with this. However, we still lack monographs on the Roma Holocaust on the Polish territory to define this matter, to describe this matter. So for now, I think there's a lot to do